Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I think we have mutes all over the place going left, right, and center. As normal, it's haphazard streaming from SMAF. Let's do that properly. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the September edition of SMAF, your monthly informal chat around the business and technology of streaming. Can you believe it? This is the start of our fourth year of SM Advanced Forum, our 48th edition. My name's Don Robinson. Some of you will know me as a contributing editor for streamingmedia.com and others for my actual job running business development for CDN and telco software company Ideas. While others of you might know me as chair of Content Delivery Summit, DJing on the Thursday night show, running drone races or developing weather satellite software, and more on this later, for greening of streaming. I do keep myself busy, and another person who likes to keep himself busy in the sector and someone who is an equally familiar face, our erstwhile MC on SMAF, Tim Siglin, also the exec director of Help Me Stream Research Foundation. Tim, are you out there?
I am out here, Don, and just listening to your list of things that you're known for makes me tired thinking about it. But I guess I have an equivalent list on my side, don't I? So
you do, yeah. It's either tired or tiresome. I don't know which. My wife would probably go with the latter, but anyway.
So I know we're going to talk about greening of streaming in a bit, but just put a quick plug in for that because the first meeting's coming up on September 9th.
Yeah, so a week today at exactly this time, tune in to greeningofstreaming.org. We'll probably put some links up there or find the Zoom links. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. Otherwise, I'm going to go on and on and on about it because it's dominating things. So let's find out who we've got on the show this week, Tim.
Sure. Well, first, let's say hi to Mark because Mark is both first while and probably more busy even.
It's fine. I'll just be over here in the corner, Don. It's fine. No worries.
No, well, you are one of the other guests. Well, you're a host, aren't you? Come on, Mark.
Just be over here in my little lagoon. No worries.
How you doing?
How are you, Dom? How are you, Tim?
Doing well.
Excellent. Things are good here. Yes, let's meet our guests.
Do I understand, Mark, that you are back to doing live red carpets now?
If you can see the dark circles under my eyes right now, it's because I have gotten an average of 3 hours of sleep a night over the past, I'd say 6 weeks, because it's been back to back live events, actual traditional on-site, on location, in a truck type stuff. Yeah, it's all seemed to have come back at the same time. Of course, it's on a bit of a delay. And we're now starting to pull back a bit because of the Delta surge. So it remains to be seen how much longer this this activity will happen. But it's been nice, and it's also been tiring.
And one of the ones you did was 10 Rings, if I remember correctly, the red carpet for that.
Yeah, we did that.
Comes out in theaters today.
Is it today? It's tomorrow. We did the red carpet for Shang-Chi and the 10 Rings, Legend of the 10 Rings, whatever. We're gearing up to do the red carpet for Eternals coming up in October. So that's, on the Marvel side of things, they're quite busy doing a lot of stuff. We're starting to see sports come back. We just did the finals of the American Flag Football League, which is more of a professional endeavor than it sounds like. And we're doing a lot of different stuff, but haven't really seen esports come back to the extent that it to its the level of its heyday at this point. But I'm not sure why that is exactly, but we'll see. Perhaps the shine has worn off, but who knows.
Well, I'm going to try to get to the theater tomorrow before the Delta surge kicked completely and watch the 10 Rings. So good. Let's jump from San Diego to Texas. Carson, you're based in Texas, is that right?
I am, yes, right outside Dallas, Texas. I don't have the accent, as you can hear, but I'll throw in a few y'alls here and there just to make it interesting.
Tim's gone blank there, so I'm going to step in. Oh, Tim's back again. He's
you go ahead.
Oh, interesting. I'm watching out in case.
Why don't you introduce our next? Yeah. In fact, why don't you introduce our next guest? Because he's somebody you and I have known for quite some time.
I was going to say he doesn't need any introduction at all. I think he should be introducing us, really. Come on, say something and come on air. Unmute yourself. I'm not even going to say your name. You've got to say it yourself. Are you out there? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, Jan Ozer here. Known primarily as contributing editor to Streaming Media Magazine and manager of the Streaming Learning Center, both course development and blog.
How's your summer been, Jan?
It's been hell. We're in the process of moving from a house, Timsaw. It's a huge rambling house, but we're moving closer to my wife's office in Blacksburg. So we're trying to consolidate 23 years of, 5,500 square feet into about 2,000 square feet, and it's not going well. It's not going well.
Well, and here's just a funny thing. Jan works in a small building on his property. It's a good sized property. In a room that has a brick wall. And so I thought the brick wall behind Jan was actually the brick wall of the building. It turns out Jan has a fake brick wall that he stands in front of for his sessions. He told me that a couple of weeks ago when I did a session with him, when he and Michelle and I did.
And now the world knows.
I guess he's going to take the brick wall with him, right?
Pardon? Yeah,
I said
it's okay.
Yeah.
We have a real brick
All right,
wall.
so
nice. It's going to look just like this.
So I want to start.
Tim's a bit out of sync because he's in the middle of a hurricane, everyone. So we're going to let him catch up. We're enjoying these technical challenges, but that is what streaming is all about. Tim, I'm going to count to 3 and then start speaking. 1. You have to start speaking and asking the questions, Tim. You're all out of sync.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you wanted to speak it for you. I'm going to turn my video off so I can preserve the connectivity. Let's start with Carson, actually. Carson, nice people at work, data analytics, a lot of decisioning. Talk to us a little bit about sort of what the decisions are that people make when they're trying to decide about QoE and QoS.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I mean, especially in this world right now where there's so many OTT services out there, SVOD, AVOD, I did my little double check of my monthly finances, and we have 9 services in our home. And I don't think I even know the login to half of them. So just overpopulation. So when we think about, really, why do people tune in and what's really important? Content obviously, is king, but I think kind of quality of experience and quality of, service level is your queen. I mean, we see that, user engagement is about 34% higher on servers that are monitored because you're checking for, playtime errors. If it's greater than 2%, a lot of people churn. If they can't find the content that they want. I mean, we've all been on the service and we're just, scrolling through video being like, I can't find anything. So that time to finding something to watch is really important to monitor as well. So is your thumbnail performing well? Is this thumbnail performing better than that thumbnail? And, we also see like buffer ratio, playtime increases by 2 to 3% if the buffer ratio is less than 1%. So getting someone to see what they want to see when they want to see it on every device is really critical right now when we think about the streaming wars and who wants to, really have those happy customers at the end of the day.
Interesting. So Jan had asked a question about sort of the measurements that you use for QoS and QoE. And Jan, if you want to expand on your question, feel free to do so. But Carson, what are the things that your customers use to make decisions, or the key, I think we call them KPIs, right? Key performance indicators.
Yep. So, so we really kind of focus and help our customers, understand like the buffer ratio. And then that leads into like a CDN, strategy conversation, making sure that, we're optimizing the CDNs that they're using. Playtime errors, is there a crash in the middle of it? Is there a problem with a certain app? We also look at things of, just exit before video starts. Did someone just not want to watch that video, or did it just take too long for it to start? So, but and then once again, I kind of use the real life experience of like, I'm logged into my service. How long is it going to take me to find the video? How long does it take me before I push play? Mm-hmm. And that, I think we all have those, I can't find anything. I'm oversaturated with videos, or I can't find something that I want to watch.
Does that consolidate?
Mark, you mentioned the Akamai.
Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Jen.
Yeah, Carson, does that consolidate to one number for you, or is it expressed in different numbers for the different measures that you talked about?
Yeah, it's kind of, so, with live events, obviously, live, you want everything to be as fast and as crisp as possible, because, someone's probably paying for a pay-per-view event. So we really want to make sure that those live events are as seamless as possible. You have a little bit more leniency when it comes to VOD, definitely when it comes to an AVOD service versus an SVOD service, because people, if you're paying for the service, we need to make sure that it's worth your while. So we do help strategize with our customers. And like I said, an SVOD service, especially if you have a global presence, a multi-CDN strategy is the way to go, because someone that is out in East Texas, where I am right now with, tier 3 providers, I'm probably going to have not the best experience if I was in the heart of Dallas, but I'm still paying the same amount, so I should have the best experience. So making sure that QoS and that playtime is dialed in as possible is going to keep me engaged as a customer and not leaving the service.
Carson, can I just chip in there? How many organizations that you engage with are actually not using multi-CDN at the moment?
Actually, a lot, more so than you would think. And also customers that don't have some folks that don't have a global presence, sometimes it makes more sense because their users are concentrated in metropolitan markets. But we do see global services that are just on one CDN, and it's there's great potential for other CDNs to become that part of that solution, and also just streamline the experience as a whole.
It's interesting.
Yes.
I've been watching the sort of multi-CDN thing emerging, and one has to wonder why people wouldn't have a multi-CDN strategy. It's not it's generally the minimum commits on the scale of CDN contracts are pretty nominal. So even the smallest operation should really be having a multi-CDN strategy. And it always surprises me that people haven't set up multi-CDN strategies. If you're going to have a contract with a CDN, presumably you're addressing your content distribution model anyway. And I should imagine you're not going to fall back on SLA credits, because I don't think I've ever heard of anyone falling back on SLA credits. So the only way to beat your CDN up is by buying from multiple providers. So I'm always surprised when people aren't.
What's your take now on the current state of multi-CDN? Do you feel, since you have your finger on the pulse, do you feel that most who are opting for such a solution are doing so based on geographical footprint? Is there anyone who's really doing it for CDN redundancy in the event of actual failure, or what are your thoughts?
I think people are essentially, what immediately jumps to mind is actually more of a sustainability issue, which I've been a little bit more focused on recently. But the bottleneck in CDN isn't capacity; it's power. And power in building big iron infrastructure at the moment, you want to have two power providers, otherwise they don't keep each other honest. So multi-CDN buying, I think, is about making sure that you're not wedded to somebody who's going to do something silly with price. Thereafter, you can use a variety of people, Carson's company and others, to help make the decisioning. And the fact that you can make decisioning on a byte by byte basis rather than a month by month basis, I think helps. But I think the initial motivator is probably price. That's the legacy in the CDN space anyway. People are very wedded to performance, but that's something that's happened since 2008. In the first decade of CDN, it was all about price and not about performance. And performance has only really emerged as an issue in CDN in the last 10 years. So I do still think that the finance directors who don't understand engineering are focused on bottom line prices, and they insist that they have competitive contracts to make sure that those prices are shopped around. But I don't know, maybe Carson's probably much more focused on it than I am. I shouldn't be.
Yeah, Carson, it sounded like you were saying that if you're seeing anyone adopt a multi-CDN strategy, it's typically because of a global footprint that they want to take advantage of various, efficiencies there. Is that the case? Do you see anyone, opting for an actual redundancy model?
I think we've seen CDN outages, recently as well. So I think that redundancy has become a hot topic of what happens when, and especially when we're talking about live events and streaming, and you have, one opportunity to make an impression, and you're on one CDN, you absolutely want to have that redundancy there. I think it is a little bit more looking towards the quality now, because, CDN, it's become, back in the day, it was a price war. Now it seems like a commodity service that everyone just, of course you're going to have a CDN to stream. So I think now it does become of what's the most effective CDN in this region, and how do we optimize this versus how do we optimize, if in the States it's ever present. So maybe there's more of a price war there, but when you're talking global reach, there's definitely CDNs that perform better in other regions than the next. So let's make sure that those end users are using that CDN and getting a great quality of service with the OTT platform that they're on.
Just going to cut in here. We just had a good, interesting question from Loki in the chat room. So he makes a comment that seeing something is wrong is good, but figuring out the cause is another problem. How do you guys go about doing the drill down? How do we work out what went wrong? It's not just that it went wrong and we switched, but improving the networks by giving feedback and so on. Is that a cycle that's closed? Is there a drilling in sort of element to the analytic here?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, sorry, Carson. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Oh, no. Yes. So, we'll see. If it's customer service, organizations that are utilizing, a service like what Nice People at Work brings to the table, real-time reporting, we see people falling off, and we'll drill down, and you can actually see if it's an issue with the app, if it's specific to a device, or if it may be caused by a CDN outage, or just I hate to use the term, but back in the day we used to call CDNs pipes, and we'd say it's just too congested. So how do we make that work? So understanding the data that you're looking at and knowing how to make those smart decisions is it's twofold. I have this data, I see that there's a problem, but you are right. What do we do with it? How do we solve for this problem? And is the data giving you those answers that you need? So that's something that we, really try hard to train our customers on, as well as make smart decisions with this data. And this is when you see this should be your natural reaction. So
Dom, I want to throw in 2 points from the Content Delivery Summit. We did that, the survey and keynote with StackPath. To Mark's question about the global versus single geographic region, we actually did ask a question in there about that, and it turns out that 2/3 of the respondents were either doing it in multiple countries across the region, which, for instance, the Benelux countries, or the German-speaking countries like Austria, Switzerland, Germany, or were doing it globally. So there were only about 1/3 who were doing local. But interestingly, for those who were doing just a single geographic region, redundancy did pop up as a point of interest. So I think we're getting there with understanding the need for redundancy, even if you're only working in the States or in Canada or Mexico or a single geographic region.
Yeah, I think this speaks to, there's an article in the Flipboard about the Akamai outage that happened about 6 weeks ago. And, that type of complete outage of a global CDN is quite rare, to the point where I don't think a lot of people are fail-safing for it. I don't think there's a lot of, effort to guard against a complete outage of your CDN, but it does happen, to the point made in the article. It absolutely does happen. It's happened to Akamai recently. It's happened to Fastly recently. It's happened to Lumen recently. So, there's a compelling case for redundancy there. And it's something that I talk about with a lot of our longtime recurring customers. And the conversation, gets down the road a little bit, and then it's, kind of forgotten about because it's not at the forefront. It's not deemed a clear and present danger, if you will. You know what I mean?
I think the other problem with this is as that article, one of the reasons I like that article, which came from Mark, actually, we'll mention him a bit more in a second, but he does go into quite a lot of depth about why it's an ecosystem issue. It's not specifically a CDN issue. Generally, it's there's a broad ecosystem. CDN tends to take the responsibility for this kind of end-to-end concept of a network, but they are themselves a virtual operator almost invariably, and they span a whole slew of different systems. So it is quite difficult when people point the finger at a CDN and say you had an outage. It is sometimes quite difficult to really pin the blame on a single entity. And actually, when you look under the hood of a CDN, they're managing many things and actually simplifying the resale of 1,000 moving parts to a content provider. And that is largely that is the role of a CDN. It's not, they're not a single network operator. That they are a reseller of many things. So anyway, it's just a point I wanted to make. I think it's a good point that Mark made in the article.
And clarify, this is not Mark East. This is Mark DeYoung.
Yeah, Mark DeYoung.
Yeah, I will admit my relationship, my company's relationship, and our customers' relationship with the CDN is somewhat different than an SVOD operator who, if you have an hour's worth of outage, that's a lot of SLA credits that you're having a conversation about at some point. Whereas if a single CDN goes down, and my event that 1 million people were watching goes down as a result because of it, and the event was an hour long, that's a complete failure. You know what I mean? And so it's a little bit different in terms of the need for redundancy and the need for fail-safing, but it's also that much less likely that it's going to happen in the course of the 1 hour that we're on air. You know what I mean? So.
Not very much. Go on, Tim.
No, I was going to say, Mark, you're the 0.001% of the 5 nines. If it fails in the hour, you're doing your live event.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk to Jan real quick. Jan, you did a study recently about YouTube codecs. Talk to us about that. I mean, there's always been, recently there's been the huge hype of, we use AV1, VP9, along with AVC. What's the reality of that?
The reality was that YouTube is only using AV1 for videos that have views that seem to exceed 5 million view counts, within the first few days. So what I did is I looked by category. So first I checked music videos, and most of those were encoded with AV1, 2 with VP9, but those averaged probably 5 to 6 million views. Then I checked the top 10 news feeds, which were all between 15,000 and 700,000. They were all VP9. And then I checked Seth Meyers, his one of his bits, and he was getting 2 or 3 million views, and 10 out of 10 were VP9, not AV1. So it really seemed like there was a ceiling in the 3 to 4 million range, where if you weren't going to get more than 3 to 4 million views, you were encoded with VP9. Now I also checked my own videos on YouTube, and they were 300 to 400 views, and those were all H.264, as were, I checked streaming medias, which are typically, in the 500 to 1500, and those were H.264 as well. So the bottom line was, if you're not seeing views in excess of, 3 or 4 million, then AV1 doesn't make sense. The last time I checked encoding time and quality, AV1 took about 18 times longer to encode than H.264. So even if you're YouTube and you have, the latest transcoding chip that should accelerate everything, it still doesn't make sense to use AV1 unless your levels get to that, the 4 to 5 million range. On the other hand, I was really surprised that they were using VP9 so frequently. If you're videos were exceeding 3,500 views, it looked like VP9 was the codec. And VP9 is only about 2x the encode complexity of H.264, but of course it doesn't have the encoding efficiency that AV1 has. It's 12 behind that. So it was just, everybody talks about AV1 and yeah, it's the next big thing. And yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense to use. And, if YouTube can't afford to use it, then very few sites can afford to use it. I mean, Netflix can, Facebook can, but below that really top tier of companies, it doesn't seem like it makes sense for a lot of the rest of us. On the other hand, VP9, which very few people implement, is seemingly used in a lot more videos than it used to be for YouTube.
What's the compression saving you're seeing at the moment? I haven't followed the codec efficiencies for a while. What is AV1 giving you a 20% byte efficiency? I'm not talking about encoding time. I'm talking about data transfer.
Yeah, I mean, what I found in a study I think I performed maybe within the last 8 to 12 months was that VP9 was about 15% more efficient than H.264, and AV1 was about 45% more efficient than H.264. So, but the problem is CDN costs have gotten so low, especially if you're a huge producer like Facebook or YouTube, that even it's just much harder to make back your encoding costs because your cost per gigabyte on transfer, which is the main cost benefit, is just down so low.
Dom, this is an interesting microcosm that Jan points out that fits exactly to greening of streaming. Do you spend, let's put the price point aside for a second. Do you spend that much more compute power to get something that's 45% more efficient, on the understanding that you're not necessarily going to do that for every single video? So there's not just the balance of cost for transport, there's also the balance of what's the power consumption cost for doing that 18x, encode.
Yeah, once we get Steam up with greening of streaming, there's going to be some interesting debates in the codec space, because that you can make efficiencies on an encode cycle, but if you don't pass those on by concentrating load and turning off the machines that you're not therefore using, and this goes for cloud services in general, you're not actually making a power saving. You yourself might not be creating the demand, but if you don't concentrate the loads and you don't turn off the machines that you would otherwise be using, the fact that you're reducing the power on a frame by frame basis actually is almost academic. You can't really claim to be saving power. The issue is much more in the underutilized peak capacity in the clouds and in the networks than actually in the efficiency, because most of these networks are running at 20% utilization or 80% underutilization. The 80% underutilization is where the planet's being choked, not in the 20% utilization. People are making some preposterous claims about sustainability, because they're saying, "Oh, look, you're not doing stuff on-prem anymore. It's suddenly saving the planet." Well, you've moved it to the cloud, and the cloud's now doing it for you. It's not, you're moving the problem, but you're not solving the problem. So, that is the essence of what greening of streaming is about: is to make sure that we take ownership of the whole problem and understand the whole problem, rather than start making preposterous claims because we're more power efficient on a system that we're just leaving on and underutilized. So we have to be very careful about making the wrong claims at the moment.
So Jan, if I'm taking what you said, let me just see if I can sort of extrapolate this out from a business standpoint. I'm going to put my MBA hat on for a second. So essentially what they've got is a business rule in place that says it's quicker to encode H.264. Let's do that on the assumption that those videos aren't going to be seen that frequently. Therefore, there wouldn't be a significant cost savings in terms of transport. On the flip side, on the upper end, the stuff that is seen a lot, they are doing AV1 implementation and doing the encoding. Do you have a sense of how many videos fall below 100 views versus how many videos fall below 10,000 views versus how many fall below 5 million views? Because to me, that would almost be the stratification that I could see them justifying the way they're doing that particular model.
I don't. But I think the last time I looked, they were uploading 500 hours of video a minute or something crazy
Mhm.
like that. And my assumption was probably 98% of them were being viewed under a couple hundred times. But that's totally an assumption.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I may try to dig for from the Help Me Stream research side, because it'd be really interesting to see that strata and see if the decisioning is not so much we would save, 10% in total transport costs for those that are below 500 views versus we're going to save a whole lot if if it's being viewed millions of times or tens of millions of times, which is why you'd make a decision to do that. So interesting. So
the other aspect of it, if I can just poke in here for a second, is it'd be interesting to know the algorithm upon which they're basing this decision to re-encode that content, right? I mean, it's streamed for who knows how many days or weeks, and then it reaches a certain point at which that decision is made, and then it goes back into a re-encode queue for the higher efficiency codec. And we need to bear in mind that they've already encoded it once, so there's a deficit that they need to dig out of for that efficiency to be realized at that point, right?
I'm not sure that's how it works. I mean, there was of the music videos that I looked at, there was one that had 9 million views, and it was still in VP9 format. So I think it seems like it was maybe genre based as well as I looked at the Dan Patrick Show, which is a show I listen to when I'm working out, and all the videos were VP9, even those that were viewed only a few hundred times. And so I think they make the decision at the very start, and then they kind of stick with it. But nobody discussed the algorithm with me. I just did some basic research, so I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a lot of re-encoding going on.
Jan, I wanted to chip in. I've got a question for you. Something you could bring me up to speed with, because again, I haven't been following the Codex space in a great deal of detail for the last year or so. But where's the overall landscape going with patents across the major codecs at the moment, and patent fees principally? Are patent fees being exercised anywhere in the ecosystem in practice, or are they all just basically lawyers fighting lawyers over in the back office? The most of the patent pools seem to give you so many bazillions of licenses before they actually start billing you an inconsequential amount of money that the patents seem to be a bit nonsensical to me. But AV1 seems to be all about trying to sidestep patent pool issues, and I'm not sure it's a problem that needs solving. I just wonder where it's at. What's your view on the landscape at the moment?
I think a very significant portion of the royalties are being paid by the cell phone companies, the TV manufacturers, the hardware vendors who are selling playback, and some encode. But I mean, encoding vendors aren't paying. I mean, there's a 100,000 de minimis exception to the H.264 pool. But I think there's those patent pools are bringing in hundreds of millions, if not billions, and that's a necessary. I mean, there's a lot of research that goes into a codec. Where H.264 was pretty clean and still ongoing for the next few years, HEVC was a total mess. VVC looks like it's potentially headed in that direction.
You mean in the HEVC direction?
Yeah, because I mean the license fees keep going up, even though the savings keep going down. I mean, when H.264 was invented, the cost per gigabyte was around 50 cents a gigabyte. And now it's like 0.000 something, but the fees keep going up. And I should point out, I do work with Sysvel. AV1, the Alliance for Open Media claims it's royalty free, but Sysvel has a pool that claims royalties on that. It's only for, it's a very small amount. It's only for consumer playback devices, but you can't really say that AV1 is open source. That's something, I don't know where that is right now in terms of getting decided, but if you're thinking about implementing AV1, certainly in hardware, that's something you need to be aware of.
Interesting. Sorry, I cut someone off who had a question there.
I was just going to ask Carson. So, we talk about sort of these decisionings, and MPAW does a lot of analytics. Do you do anything around suggesting to customers, looking at efficiencies for codecs, or is that primarily just decision that happens prior to where you're measuring?
Yeah, those decisions happen prior to someone like uploading a video into their OVP or wherever they have their repository. But it is interesting, and I mean, this conversation makes my brain think that way. Like, what is the data that someone's looking at to decide, at what codec, or are we talking a 4K video? Is it worth it? Are my end users going to be see? Like, how is that decision being made in regards to, what are we presenting to our customers? And I think that there probably is a lot of just not strategic thought right now. And it's getting there. And it sounds like just Jan, based on your, your research, it's the whys and the why did we do this? I'd be curious to understand, the thought process there, because, making decisions based on data as just everyone now kind of looks back and it's like, well, was that a gut check, or is that a gut decision, or was that a data-driven decision? So yeah, I think that that's probably the direction everyone's going, but why initially codecs were made, bit rates, et cetera. That'd be an interesting conversation to see where it used to be and where it is now.
And to a certain extent, we've all had H.264. We've used H.264. Every few years, we get a discussion about, should we go to a new codec? And, you heard Jan talk about the patent pool issues. If you go far enough back to where H.264 came into I used it in video conferencing before it came to streaming. It came to streaming around the time of MPEG-4 Part 2, which wasn't super efficient compared to MPEG-2, but H.264 was very efficient compared to MPEG-2, so the decisions were made to move that way. It would be an interesting scenario to say, if your customer is paying us, even if they're only paying 0.001 cent per gig for transfer, what happens if they reach this particular threshold? Should there be a business decision that kicks in to say, let's find a more efficient codec, even if it only is going to get us 35 or 40%, because that's a huge cost savings if you're talking about delivering 100 million views.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with VP9 and YouTube was that in my tests, VP9 wasn't that much more efficient than H.264, but YouTube, they could be using a different VP9 codec, and it looks like they're using hardware encoding, so that it is going to be a different codec. So we don't know, I wasn't able to download the files and look at the quality and kind of figure out if they're more efficient than what I was able to produce with the VP9 codec and FFmpeg. And that could be kind of a big point in the decision-making process. 15% may not be enough to flip the switch, but if you can get 25% on, large numbers of videos, then that could be a significant cost saving. Anything at YouTube scale is going to be significant. I mean, even 10% or 15% is going to be significant with their volumes.
Interesting. So let's see, Jan, let's talk a little bit too about your training that you're doing, or the training that you're offering. Just give us a slight 2-minute overview of that.
The focus of the training that I've done is kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, you've got a technical person, maybe they have an engineering degree or a technical degree. They're coming into streaming, and there's so much domain knowledge that they need to know to be useful. Things like CVR versus VBR, what a CDN is, what QoS is versus QoE, all that stuff. And you kind of pick it up as you go along, but it really does kind of make it difficult for you to contribute immediately if you don't know all that stuff. And that's what I tried to do with my course, Streaming Media 101. In addition, there's a lot of techniques that I think you need to know. You need to know what bitrate viewer is. You need to know what media info is, FFmpeg, a lot of other tools. What is a video quality metric? Where do you use it? How do you compute it? And so what I tried to do in Streaming Media 101, which is kind of the course for that person who's coming into the industry, is put together the domain knowledge they needed, as well as put together some exercises to teach them the skills and the tools they need to really contribute right away. And it's resonated with some pretty big companies. So it's the next level I'm going to is the sales and marketing executive who doesn't need to know how FFmpeg works, but he or she may need to know what it is. They certainly need to know what codecs are. They need to have a discussion level knowledge like we just did on codecs as to which are more efficient and why, but they don't really need to get down to that level. So I'm trying to, the first course was, what does a technician or engineer need to know? And now I'm kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, what does the person who's writing your marketing materials need to know, or a person who's going out selling your technology or your product? So, and it's some very big companies have used it for, Dolby, for example, or Bitmovin, apply it to pretty much all their new technical employees, and it's getting good uptake.
Nice.
Jen, I'm going to jump in. Something you highlighted there that I think is pertinent. So last week, I think it was, I watched the Limelight 2.0 strategy announcements and so on. And some of the key things that Limelight were highlighting was that the market has for quite a while been componentized into point tools, as they called them. So many different small individual componented tools, which systems integrators within operators were having to piece together. So if you look at Amazon, every day they announce a new toolkit, a new kind of channel of features, which if you want to use them, you can bring them into your model and you can start integrating them and so on. And part of Limelight's view at the moment is that there are many content providers coming into the market who really kind of just want a solution. They don't really want to start nitpicking over the details. They're much more focused on top line growth than on bottom line management. And I sense a bit of a change. We've been talking a lot about performance, both with Carsten and yourself and so on, and how for many years, I mentioned it earlier as well, for many years, we've seen the streaming space really getting into details, millisecond startup times or tiny amounts of bandwidth efficiency and so on and so forth. But the impression I'm getting at the moment is that people actually kind of don't care. They kind of just want a video solution that works. As long as it's kind of affordable, they're more worried about top line growth than about bottom line management. And I kind of put that to both, well, actually, all of you guys. Mark, you're kind of a practitioner in many ways as well. I just wanted to see what you think, whether you think that's a change in the trend in the sector at the moment, and whether the pressure to be milliseconds faster is going to matter outside of CDN switching or outside of the lab where we're benchmarking these codecs and so on, and whether actually in commercial practice for the next year or two we're going to see people really not caring how the tools work. What they want to know is they work, it's affordable, but can they get people to tune into the streams? I just want to know what any of the three of you guys think.
From the live events perspective, it's exactly what I was talking about with the CDN redundancy thing. Like, no, does it work? Yes, fine. That's as far as that conversation goes. There's no discussion like there would have been maybe a decade ago with regard to the finer points of the telemetry and how how actionable is the data that we're getting back from the CDN and that sort of thing. It's basically like, is it likely that we'll ever have to care about that? If the answer is no, that's as far as the customer wants to go, as far as I've seen. But it's a vastly different scenario for a large SVOD provider or a large content creator who has a massive audience on a 24/7 basis. Very different equation.
Yeah.
So for the average person, it's like turning on the water. It works. You don't think about how it goes through the pipes and all that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Video delivery is, and I'm sure you both agree, is very much a commoditized utility at this point.
Yeah, I think, 15 years ago when Brightcove and Kaltura was first introduced, I really thought the world was going to go in that direction. And people don't want the one-stop shop. Bitmovin put out a report in 2020, something like 43% of the companies reported that they were building their own encoding or other tools with FFmpeg or other open source tools. And I spoke to the CTO of Brightcove a few years ago, and he basically said, with technical people, it's kind of a wave. Some years they want to do it themselves, some years they want to just job out the entire process. So I think, with all due respect to Limelight, we heard the same thing from Brightcove 15 years ago, and that didn't trigger this wave to OVPs that handled everything from ingest to analytics. I think, separate, Wows is doing great, Bitmoves is doing great, and I think they'll continue to do so, because a lot of people really, if you're top shelf and in the business, that whole infrastructure and supply chain is critical to your success. It's not incidental. You've got to own it, and and that's why all the bigs have their own encoding farms. Certainly at a level below that, you're going to use commercial tools.
That wasn't a top for the big 20 customers that Limelight were talking about. They were talking about that sort of middle tier, lower tier market where there maybe I think the number they quoted was a 6 million tech spend, not a 60 million or a 6 billion tech spend, but a 6 million tech spend. They really just want the wrapped up solution. They're not nitpicking at that level of detail. They're much more concerned on top line growth. And I think that my gut feeling tells me that's where the focus is at the moment. It's a sort of post-pandemic hysteria. I don't know. Carsten, you got any views on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you are talking about the big media companies out, they straddle the line of being technology companies now, where they used to buy, best of breed and, use this partner for this. And now, you're right. They're building out their own data analytics platform. They're building out their own OVPs. They're not utilizing a Brightcove, et cetera. They're going to have their own management system internally. So I think that there's a shift, and maybe it even has to do with talent that's out there, but I see a lot of my friends that have been in the market, that maybe were at Google or Apple or something like that, are now at these larger SVOD service like the HBO Max, because they lean more towards being a technology company, building out that entire infrastructure to support the services. But then you see these little niche services that, they just have compelling content that's really specific and they want to spread the word. They don't know how to do this stuff. So they have to have a turnkey solution to get that content out there. So I definitely see a different focus within where you sit as far as your what you're providing your end user.
It's an interesting point you bring up about human resource as well. I think there is a complexity going on in the skills in the market at the moment as well. I think there's an awful lot of people who've stuck streaming into their CV in the last 2 years, and that's clouded the market. So I think there's many startups, there's many good techs who've been sucked into many thousands of startups, but there's then many hundreds of thousands of blaggers who are making it up that they've got some understanding of the streaming space that are clouding the market as well. So it's definitely made things complex, and I should imagine if I was running a 6 million bottom line budget, I would be struggling to know if the techs I was hiring, if the hires I were making were actually going to be able to keep that under control. It might be just easier to go, this company's got a good enough solution, I'll buy from them for the moment and look at the top line.
And I think that's the point Jan's making. There's that pendulum that goes back and forth. If you get good talent in, they'll say, look, we can do it better. We've done it before. Here's how we would do it again. And to Carson's point about the media companies being technology companies, a couple of years ago when I did an interim chief strategy officer role for a algorithm company that did content aware encoding, with H.264, you're absolutely right, Carson. We would go in to talk to media companies thinking you could offer them a ready-made solution. And what they'd say is, okay, we've got an FFmpeg workflow for 264 and 265. Show us how yours fits in that without messing up our production line. In other words, we'll set up a separate line for you. You show us the efficiencies. And what that took was a fairly heavy lift from the company I was working with to get it to fit into their technology workflow, because every workflow is different for each media company.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. You almost are competing against the internal teams as opposed to, your competitors in the marketplace sometimes.
That is exactly what we learned. Is it was the not invented here syndrome could easily just kibosh any potential that you were going to do from that standpoint. So let's sort of, we're coming down toward the end. Let's talk about future analytics. As we go forward 18 months or so from now, as I've done surveys through Help Me Stream, we've had people say, here are things we want to measure, but I'm curious what nice people at work sort of see they're going towards for measurements that potential customers might want?
It's interesting. I mean, when it comes to just the world that we live in right now, it's been very interesting. I mean, I don't think anyone expected us to be in the position that we're in. But when we think about like OTT services and, the success that they've seen with lockdowns as well. So I start thinking about, okay, is this our new norm, or what happens when we're all out and we're not, we're actually going to the gym and we're not using our fitness on demand classes. So how do these services that have thrived during this time, how do they maintain? I mean, so there's a lot of thought that I think about when I'm working with my customers of like, how do we make this so compelling that, when the world opens up, I don't particularly want to go back into a gym. I mean, I like doing my classes. I like my little apps. I love doing it, which is never something I ever thought that I'd like to do. But I now don't foresee myself going back to a gym. So whatever app I'm using has been compelling enough to keep me and want to keep me there. So those are the questions that I always pose is, how do we strategize and think about, is it trying to find like-minded subscribers and doing like, Google lookalike campaigns or Facebook lookalike campaigns, or is it just understanding content patterns and making sure your end users are really engaged with that content that they find compelling, and that your recommendation engine is doing a great job promoting content that the data will show that they'll like. So I think about this world and I think about utilizing data, and I think about how are customers going to succeed once, the world, I don't know what the new normal looks like, but once gyms open up again, once movie theaters are open, how's that going to affect your subscriber base? And are you thinking about that a year in advance? Are you forecasting your Q3 2022 subscribers, and how are we going to get there?
Good.
I'm just going to chip in something interesting there, cousin. We've been unlocked completely here for about 2 months. There's no laws, no lockdown regulations, no restrictions, no mandation of masks or anything. I thought people, and what's very difficult to understand at the moment is there's definitely a large number of people, I have no idea what proportion, behaving completely pre-pandemic. And there's another bunch of people I keep bumping into who are in hazmat suits, emerging, peering out of their doors and running to the shops and back. And you don't know about them. So I have no idea how many of them there are. But there is clearly a large number of people who are unable to adapt to change and are going back to their old patterns. So I don't know what's going on in the States at the moment, and it's clear there's all sorts of different news going everywhere, but there is certainly a large number of people who are just going back to how they used to be. So it's hard to tell at the moment, for sure.
Absolutely.
So I've got one last question for Carson, and then I'm going to come to Jan. Carson, one of the things we've really tried to emphasize on SMAF is women in streaming media. Do you think the pandemic has changed sort of the pattern of women coming into the industry? Has it slowed it down or accelerated it? And I understand I'm asking this because you are our Women in Streaming Media guest this month, but just what's your general sense of how the industry is trying to diversify?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because I've been in this space for, over 2 decades, and, still there's not many of us. I think honestly, I think being able to work remotely and the Zooms and, the working from home, I think it allowed new personalities and talent to come into this space, and also, maybe more female talent, because, women are really great at multitasking, and, these women that have worked from home have really thrived and done well with the families, done well with their jobs, done well with doing everything. When I think some other people have struggled, and I didn't do the greatest job at the beginning, but I figured it out. And I think that the fact that, being remote is we're so used to it now. We've all become really good at it. And I think that's just opened the opportunity where, you don't have to be in the office 5 days a week, and you don't have to be in the same city that you're headquartered in. You can be remote. So the talent pool is a lot larger. And I think that has opened the doors for really talented female professionals to thrive in this industry. And also we're consumers. I mean, we're the ones that are signing up for OTT services for our families, for the households. So you should be marketing to me, because I'm the boss in my house.
Well, that's a really good point about the fact that remote work allows for more multitasking, or even doing micro bursts of work in between other things that you're traditionally doing. Jan, 18 months from now, what will the codec space look like? Will we still be arguing that something needs to replace H.264?
I thought you were going to ask me about streaming media executives with girls' names. So 18 months from now,
I've never actually seen Jan break down in the middle of something. He's normally
sorry.
That was super witty. I love that.
The 18 months from now, I think 97% of the video that we see on the internet will still be H.264, because most of it's relatively low stream count. I think VVC will still be pretty much nowhere. I think HEVC will still be in the living room and some mobile primarily. And I think there's a chance for LCEVC to make inroads, because it's kind of a different approach towards compression technology. But I think AV1, unless they make great strides in terms of encoding efficiency, and there are some AV1 codecs that do that, it's going to be slow growth only. So I don't see major changes in the next 18 months. I think it's going to take quite a long time for anything dramatically to change.
Mark, what about from your standpoint? I mean, H.264 obviously is bread and butter. Do you see clients out there saying, "Hey, give me another codec, please, so I can be more efficient"?
AVC for me, please. It's still very much H.264 in the live event space. We are doing some pretty advanced encoding with regard to 10-bit HDR and surround audio and things like that require just a more advanced codec to support, number of channels and things like that. But it's really not a matter of encoding efficiency and that sort of thing at this point. I also wanted to mention, I wonder if we're, and maybe this is a question for Jen, but are we maybe seeing a slowdown in the adoption of higher efficiency hardware-based encoding due to the chip deficit right now? Or has there been any slowdown in manufacturers creating new video encoding hardware due to that? And is that affecting the adoption of things like AV1 at all?
Great question. David Ronca was interviewed by a guy named John Porterfield, and he talked about the fact, and this is available on YouTube, and he talked about the fact that the AV1 decode hardware that was expected in 2020, 2021 was being pushed back to 2025. And wow. AV1 is a pretty lightweight codec from a decompression standpoint, but if you're mobile, obviously hardware support is going to be critical to battery life and performance. So I think the chip slowdown is hurting, at least on the decode side in the mobile space.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it must, for something like AV1, it might be a death blow, right? I mean, it's
AV2 is coming. The numbers what I found with YouTube was really just striking. The article basically says, hey, if YouTube can't afford it, you probably can't afford it either.
Right.
And there are so few companies that produce in the 5 to 10 million view count range. YouTube, Facebook, Netflix, Hulu, some others, but underneath that really high small tier, there's very few companies. But again, VP9 just may be worth a second look.
So that's actually a really, sorry, Mark, if you've got something else to add, but I was going to say you created a beautiful segue for the end.
That's what I do, Tim.
Okay.
Create beautiful segues.
One of the things that I was going to mention is with Help Me Stream, we actually, we're taking old equipment and trying to figure out how to make it more efficient. And it's an interesting point that with the chip shortages, it's kind of like used cars. The prices of used cars have gone up dramatically because new cars aren't there. I was going to say, by the time we meet next month, we'll have our first official testbed facility. We're actually tied in with a university innovation lab, and we'll begin the process of tearing apart these donated pieces of gear and trying to figure out how to fit them into bicycles, because we've decided that bicycle power as a supplemental power to solar is something that we need to actually provide when we put these devices out in the field to NGOs. So yeah, Mark, I could see the wheels turning already. Essentially, we're trying to figure out if we can use the tubes on an old bike to actually house components of the computer for the streaming server that would then be powered by pedaling the recumbent that would charge the batteries that would charge the streaming server. So crazy ideas, but that's what Help Me Stream is all about. And
I definitely was not expecting to hear the word bicycles in that sentence, but that's
yeah,
awesome.
and I'll as we get it up and running, I will send some pictures. But Dom, I know you want to also talk about greening of streaming, because we're right here at the end, and that's coming up in the next couple of days. You, of course, are focusing on power efficiency on the front end. I'm focusing on how do I extend the life of products. But the beauty is those two pieces fit perfectly together as the bookends for greening of streaming.
Yeah, I before I talk for 2 seconds about greening and streaming, I want to mention that there was a quite an interesting hour-long program about which I saw at the beginning of this year, about a group of people who were using pedal power to power a house for a day. And it was really interesting. They needed about 80 people pedaling pretty hard all day to power just one house. So bear that in mind. And it was quite interesting when they put the cooker on to cook the Sunday lunch. The groan that you heard from those 80 people when they felt the weight hitting on the dynamos or whatever they were using to power the bikes. Turning on an oven with a kilowatt, 2-3 kilowatt demand, you heard this of these people sweating to try and power this thing. So yeah,
thank God I only need to do 19.5 volts and lower.
Non-trivial exercise. Listen, I'm going to probably take us through greening and streaming and out. So I wanted, before I do that, say a massive thank you to Carsten for coming on. And also, just while I do that, also highlight that we are looking for more female guests on SMAF. So please network out. If you're watching, please tell your colleagues and friends if they've got views and opinions and interesting stories about the streaming industry. Get in touch with us, because we do want more. We do want more participation from them. But thank you very much, Carsten, for representing the feminist media and yourself. Yeah. Great guest, and stay safe in Texas. And Jan, after your previous comment just now, I'm not sure if I should be calling you a they from now on, but Jan, thank you very much for representing both the men and the women today. It's been appreciated, and the Codex. That's been superb. You've been a wonderful guest as always, and so on. Mark, I'm wishing I was sitting in San Diego. It's looking beautiful behind you there, as always. I don't know how you do it, really. It's just
welcome to paradise.
And Tim, we actually have a bit of video from Tim there.
Yeah, I tried to set it up so that you could actually see me at the end. But thanks, Dom. It's been a great discussion today.
It's been awesome. And so I do want to not be remiss. I promised Mark, who is Mark de Jong, who is in the chat room, that I would highlight to everyone that he is out finally with the CDN Alliance, which I'm a big supporter of. All power to him for getting that off the ground. If you get a chance, go and check cdnalliance.org. Mark's doing a great thing in trying to create a framework that sits between the CDNs and the different telcos and operators who are delivering CDN services in introducing the CDN Alliance. It's a complicated space. Somebody's been needing to do that for a while, in my opinion, and Mark's taken the challenge on, which is no mean feat, as I only too well know, because I'm going to plug my own Alliance initiative. There is exactly 1 week today, a launch on September the 9th of the greening of streaming. You've probably heard Tim and I mention this for the last year and a half as we've been brewing it. Sustainability is becoming a sort of central topic, and before the wider stakeholder community who are interested in sustainability issues points their finger at the streaming sector and starts asking questions we can't answer, we are going to start off with a meeting next week to look at, well, we're starting off with a talk about language. Let me just flick through the agenda briefly. look at the lexicon and measures and terminology that people are using in describing streaming, because we've got everything from frames per watt to kilowatt hours to carbon utilization and so on. So we're going to try and get the industry together to start discussing these, look at the scope of the problem. We've got about 17 speakers over 2 hours, so it's going to be hard and fast 2-hour session. Please tune in and tell people to come in and listen. And we've got a great number of speakers. Some of these are still to be confirmed. This is the nearly final agenda. Some of these guys are prone to change, I hasten to add. And we will go after hours and let some Q&A happen at the end of that session. But the aim is to get the industry into a coherent state, because as most of you will have probably seen, we had Elon Musk pointed the finger of sustainability questions at the crypto mining industry earlier this year, which caused a big international furore. Just to highlight something which I posted in an article, which you can find on the SMAF feed at the moment, a few weeks ago. There were 700,000 GPUs sold into the crypto mining space last year. And that caused everyone to draw a breath because of the huge power demand that's placed on the global power infrastructure. Just to highlight that in the same period of time, there were over 100 million subscribers added to OTT services, and each one of those guys will be using a GPU. So in terms of power demand, our industry dwarfs crypto mining. The main reason that the finger is not being pointed at our industry at the moment is because everybody loves watching video and nobody wants it to go away, unlike the nasty, evil crypto fraudsters. So as an industry, we need to get our ducks in a row, and we are kicking that off next week. We've got a series of members meetings coming through the autumn, and we'll be leading up to a big public launch to the general public in the UK Parliament in December. So I would be honored if you would attend that meeting, spread the word, and even better if you would join up as members and participate, because there's an awful lot to be done in that space. Cool. With that, I am going to stop talking. Once again, thank all the guests for joining us, and we will be back next month. Stay tuned to SMAF. Thank you for coming.